What's up, guys? Welcome back to the stream and happy Tuesday. I hope everybody had a fantastic kickoff to the week and is ready for a great opportunity to make some new friends and have a great sense of connection on our stream today. We are live right now on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Getter, and of course to our locals community. And I'm so glad to see all of you guys already active in the chat and saying hello to all of our community members, each other, ourselves. I don't know. Isabel's tired. It's been a long day, but excited to be hanging out with all of you guys as usual. It's the highlight of every single day for me and love seeing these communities continue to grow. We had a humongous spike in viewership in Rumble the last couple of weeks, which has been more than exciting. And I just cannot wait to see you guys continue sharing all of our content over there. So thank you so much to our Rumble gang on YouTube. We officially hit 15,000 subscribers yesterday, which is awesome. And we continue just growing like absolute bonkers crazy over on Instagram and TikTok. So if you guys joined us from over there with the link in my bio or in my stories, welcome. I'm so glad you are here and welcome to the stream. Just as a reminder, this week is a little bit unique and special because I am traveling. So I'm actually pre-recording this stream right now on Tuesday morning, but I'm still recording it on Tuesday. So we're as close to live as possible, but I'm on an airplane during our normal streaming time today. And I'll be sharing this with you later this evening when I get to Colorado, where I grew up, and I'll be staying at my family's house for the next couple of days because, drum roll please, I am ordering my wedding dress tomorrow, which I'm super excited about. I have narrowed it down to a few options. I have yet to decide exactly which one I want, which I'm a little bit nervous about. So I'm actually going to have to make that decision in the moment tomorrow, but I've narrowed it down to a few options, trying both of the options on again tomorrow and making a final decision. I get to say yes to the dress tomorrow, which is really crazy that this day is finally here. I'm touring my wedding venue again this week and just doing some fun wedding planning stuff with my mom and dad and escaping the hurricane incoming path. Not that it's going to impact Miami, but certainly is impacting the weather in South Florida pretty substantially. So I get to go experience some crisp, humidity-free, lovely early fall in Colorado, which I'm very excited about over the next couple of days. And because of that, obviously, like I just said, the stream today is pre-recorded. Tomorrow we will be live, but we're going to be at my family's house, which is going to feel a little bit different. You guys know if you've been here long enough that we've gone live for my family's house a little bit before, but we're not in the studio. It's a little bit more rough around the edges, but still very fun. And on Thursday, we will be pre-recorded as well because I will be indisposed, out of cell service and out of Wi-Fi for quite some time. So today and Thursday pre-recorded. Tomorrow we are live at a different time than normal, but at my family's house. But lots and lots of fun stuff to share with you guys along the way. Friday, obviously, we are back in the studio. We're going to be doing some really fun stuff on Friday, but I will be back here in this wonderful, amazing room on Friday when we get back from my trip to Colorado. All right, we got a lot to talk about today. As we are jumping in, please do me a huge, huge, huge favor and hit the like button on this episode. That might look like a thumbs up, or it could look like a little heart to help get us going in the algorithm. Ring the notification bell so that you always know when we go live or upload a new video. And of course, most importantly, smash that follow or subscribe button on whatever platform you are watching on right now. These streams are completely free to watch. They will always be totally free to watch, but as somebody without a huge budget and is just doing this out of her house, it means the absolute world when you guys hit that follow or subscribe button to help grow these communities and give us more opportunities to keep doing this stream full time. I want to give a huge shout out to our amazing sponsor for today's stream real quick, Rough Greens. I'm posting a reel for them today on Instagram as well, by the way, and they are just so absolutely phenomenal. Libby, my dog, loves their product, and I know your dog will too. If you haven't heard me talk about them before, Rough Greens is an all-natural, human-grade, made in America supplement for your dog's food, and it improves their energy, their joint health, digestion, their immune function. It's kind of like a protein powder. You just take a scoop and you add it on top of their food that they normally eat, and they have some treats and dental chews and other products as well that help to provide almost 20 different fruits and vegetables and nutrient values that aren't usually present in your dog's food, adding digestive enzymes, probiotics, omega oils, and more to their diet that's probably missing right now. Libby absolutely loves this product, and her coat is shinier. She's a lot more playful. She has a lot more energy. She's truly obsessed with all of the treats in particular. You guys can grab your rough greens for your dog at the link that I'm dropping in the live chat right now, but an amazing made in America, all natural business that I'm super excited to be partnering with. Please, please, please go check them out and consider supporting their business because they are doing all of the right things. Okay, jumping into the substance of what we want to stream about today. Sorry for that long lead up, but we do have a lot of stuff to cover just in terms of scheduling changes and all of that this week. I want to focus today on our little bit shorter pre-recorded stream on freedom of speech. It's a general topic that I think we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last year or so on the stream, and certainly over the last several years in all of my content. Freedom of speech being one of the most important things, I believe, to a functioning free society, and without which we cannot even remotely pretend to live like we live in a free society. At least in the United States of America, free speech is first in our Bill of Rights for a reason. Our freedom of expression, our ability to freely worship how we see fit, our ability to freely assemble with others, and certainly to speak our minds comes first in our Bill of Rights, in the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, in our First Amendment to the Constitution, because it is the very foundation of what it means to live in a free society. You can't remotely pretend that you have freedom or you have liberty if at the most basic level you lack the freedom and liberty to say what you believe, to privately worship how you want to worship, to gather with others and make your feelings and your values known, your sentiments known to the world without interference from a far too powerful government. If you lack that in society, every other freedom or liberty that you say that you enjoy basically doesn't exist, right? I mean, you can say that it's there within the codified language of your constitution or your legal statutes or your system of governance. But if you lack the ability to say what you want to say, believe what you want to believe, and have the values that you want to have, to hell with any other freedom or supposed liberty that is enshrined in your constitution, in your governing documents, in your laws, etc. It essentially just doesn't exist to begin with, no matter what you want to say. And none of that was ever more obvious to me than when I had the opportunity to travel to a not so free country during college as part of a Spanish class that I was taking for my Spanish minor, my freshman year of college, which would have been spring 2016. I had the opportunity to go before any of the travel restrictions were lifted to Cuba as some sort of exchange program with my university. And there was a small group of us, about 15 students and our professor, and we were taken all over the country, toured all around, had really unique experiences to sit down with government agencies and more by official government-approved tour guides that told us all of the official statements for the government of Cuba and how wonderful and utopian and free and spectacular their government and country and society and culture were. But in reality, we were seeing a completely different picture right before our eyes than what the government was telling us. And I wrote an entire chapter about this in my first self-published book. So those of you who have had the chance to read it, you understand what I'm talking about, and you can please feel free to read more about my story traveling to Cuba another time. But generally speaking, we were being told by all of these government approved tour guides and government officials and political agents and whatever that Cuba was so wonderful. It was so utopian. It was so free of any government corruption and enshrining civil liberties for all of their people, that in the Cuban Constitution, you had the right to worship how you want. You had the right to be LGBTQ and love who you want. You had the right to free healthcare, to free education, to a job, etc. But in practice, all of the people that we met and all of the experiences that we had on the ground actually involved zero of those liberties, because there was no freedom of speech to begin with. There was no freedom of expression to begin with. So if you cannot freely speak, of course you cannot freely worship. Of course you cannot freely love whoever you want to love, which is how they were putting it in all of our meetings. That simply doesn't exist, no matter what is written in your constitution, no matter what is the official statute of your legal system or in your governing documents. The lack of the enshrinement of freedom of expression negates and eradicates any other freedom in your nation's laws, legal system, and founding documents. And what's really sad is over the last few years, obviously Cuba has changed dramatically since we started opening up the country to a lot more international travel. I have not been yet since 2016, so I would really like to go again since I live here in Miami now. It's like a 30-minute flight to go down there. I'd love to see what's changed since then. But in Western culture and in supposed democratic republics, in supposed democracies, in supposedly free societies, over the last several years, we've seen this evolution of freedom of speech into something that is no longer a guarantee and certainly is not a right that is universally beloved by others. And those of you that live in Europe, I think, know this and feel this a bit more than the average American. You don't have freedom of speech the same way that Americans do, enshrined in a constitution, enshrined in governing documents, enshrined in a legal code. Rather, hate speech can be prosecuted, and people not liking what you have to say means you can be prosecuted for that. Praying and worship isn't always a universally free experience in many of your countries, which is something that we take for granted in America today, knowing that that is the very foundation of how our culture and government is supposed to operate. I think we've started in the last few years to see an evolution and to see Americans' freedom of speech start to be not something we take for granted anymore, but something that is very much under attack, especially in this age where our freedom of speech and the public square, where we do exercise our right to express ourselves, isn't happening outside on a street corner, but it's happening here through a screen on social media platforms, on long-form video platforms, the same ones we are live on right now. When we see this era of censorship and this era of one-sided bias and this era of silencing anyone who disagrees with the norm or the narrative that is propagated 100% of the time by the people in power, that's when you start to realize that freedom of speech is a right, certainly in America, but it's also a huge privilege, and it's something that we have to keep fighting for. We're going to unpack two stories today, one from Europe and one from here in America, that specifically outline this reality that freedom of speech has truly never been under attack and under threat more than it is today. And I just want to caution us as we have this conversation today that if we are unwilling to speak up now, to identify now that this is never going to be something that we are okay with, that freedom of expression is the bare minimum right that we expect to be enshrined in our legal documents, in our founding documents, in the way that our nation governs. If we don't fight today for this right and privilege, we are very quickly losing the opportunity to do so. And I say that not to totally freak you out or like make you stop breathing or hyperventilating, but to say that with urgency, because I think most people, at least in the United States, have taken our freedom of expression for granted for so long. It has been baked into our Bill of Rights, our first 10 amendments to the Constitution, since very early on in our country's founding for the last several hundred years. And up until recently, mass censorship and mass concerns with our ability to express ourselves hasn't really been an issue, except the last few years. I think we've taken it for granted for so long, and it's been the norm for so long, that we honestly don't know how to respond when that threat is in existence and when that threat presents itself to us. The easiest answer is just to lean back into the very conversation itself, to freely protest, to freely assemble with others, to freely make your values known, and to speak up against those in power, because that's what right you have. But if we continue to just say, okay, well, it's just one person, it's just one post, it's just one YouTube channel, it's just one really extreme example, those extreme examples are going to become more and more and more normalized until we are able to continue fighting for ourselves and continue speaking up. So I want to start jumping across the pond because I saw this story a few weeks ago and was just absolutely floored by how truly outrageous it was. You guys know that I am Catholic, but I think this applies to any denomination of Christianity and certainly any religious tendency at all. If this story does not completely shatter you and just make you so frustrated about where Western civilization is going, I honestly don't know what will. I saw this a few weeks ago from the Catholic News Agency. Even if you're not Catholic, they do a really great job sharing faith-based news and stories from around the world that go extremely underreported from the mainstream media, so highly suggest you check them out. But a few weeks ago, a man in the United Kingdom was fined. He was actually charged, prosecuted, for praying outside of an abortion clinic silently. And then they obviously prosecuted him with criminal charges. So this is the man, Adam Smith Connor. He was standing outside of an abortion facility in Bournemouth, England in early 2022. He was fined back in 2022. So this has been like a year since this happened, at least many, many months since this happened. And initially he was fined in 2022 because he was praying silently, not making a scene, not harassing any customers going in, not with any obscene images on a poster board. He was standing outside on a sidewalk, praying silently within what they are calling an abortion facility censorship zone or a buffer zone. So I guess the way that I've tried to unpack this and understand this, and everybody watching from across the pond, you might let us know in the chat if you have any more experience with this, but in a certain logistical area outside of the doors of an abortion facility in the United Kingdom, there is no freedom of expression. There is no freedom of speech whatsoever. Like, you take one step in the buffer zone and all of a sudden any opportunity to freely express yourself is gone. We kind of have the reverse of that in America on college campuses, which we call free speech zones, which are also exceptionally problematic and a huge, huge, huge issue. But we would say that in the zone, you can speak freely. Outside the zone, you can't. This is kind of the reverse of that in the United Kingdom. Chat, you might know a little bit better than me, but I guess he was standing inside of this zone, silently praying to himself, not causing a scene, not telling people not to go in, not holding a poster board with obscene images, but quite literally just standing there praying silently. And the government ended up fining him for that in 2022 when this happened. Alliance Defending Freedom, which is an amazing organization both here in the US and the UK. They do incredible pro bono work for a lot of these people who are subject to what I would believe is malicious prosecution and certainly government overreach and too much government power. But they said on August 4th that Smith Connor, this man Adam, is expected in the magistrate's court on August 9th. This is all happening this month. I actually don't know what the update is, if there is an update then, but he was going to plead not guilty. He did end up pleading not guilty to criminal charges. So it wasn't enough to just fine this man in 2022 for praying silently outside of an abortion clinic. They now had to charge him with criminal charges for standing there with his eyes closed, praying to God silently. Oh no. How atrocious. How infringing on other people's rights, apparently. He had approached a British Pregnancy Advisory Service abortion facility in Bournemouth intending to pray for his unborn son, who had died in an abortion he helped procure at a similar facility more than 2 decades ago. So get this, not only was this man just silently praying to himself, he was praying for his son, who he had obtained an abortion for 20 years ago and is still dealing with the guilt and ramifications and anger and shame associated with that process. He wanted to pray for his son, who was killed in an abortion, very personal matter, at a similar facility 20 years ago. And that was infringing on other people's safety or rights to the point that criminal charges needed to be brought against this man. Unfreaking believable. He stood silently, not even looking at the clinic, with his back to the clinic to respect the privacy of staff and visitors. So he was standing in front of a building, not even looking at it, not looking at any of the people going in, praying silently, and that means you're a criminal in the UK now. Community safety officers inquired about what he was doing, and he responded, praying for my son who is deceased. Simple answer. Really simple answer. The Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole Council issued a charge against Adam on May 12th, but did not inform him of the charge until July. In permitting the prosecution of silent prayer, his legal team said, "We are sailing into dangerous waters regarding human rights protections in the UK. Censorship zones are inherently wrong and engender unhelpful legal confusion regarding the right to free thought. Both domestic and international law have long established freedom of thought as an absolute right that must not ever be interfered with interfered with by the state. In various other circumstances, the police and the courts have made it clear that silent prayer is not a criminal act. And yet, BCP Council has introduced a rights-restricting censorship zone, which they now argue extends to a ban on silent prayer. The zone was created by the council, enforced by the council, and now also prosecuted by the council. This is a remarkable consolidation of power, making the council the judge, the jury, and executioner. Wow. This case has no place in a country with a historical and proud commitment to the rule of law. The code for Crown prosecutors requires prosecutors to be even-handed in their approach to every case and to protect the rights of suspects and defendants, a duty which has been ignored at every stage by the council, which has not only shown itself to be incapable of impartiality, but also failed to grasp the gravity of inaugurating thought crime trials in the UK. I love how they worded this and how they established this. Freedom of thought. The right to free thought. What we're talking about here with this particular case blows my mind, because we're not even talking about infringement on freedom of speech at this point. We're not even talking about freedom of expression or freedom of worship or freedom of assembly. We're talking about the right to free thought. For a man to be standing outside, not bothering anyone, in front of a building, not even looking at a building, or paying any attention to who was going in or not, to bow his head, close his eyes, and silently pray, silently think thoughts to himself, now all of a sudden is being prosecuted with criminal charges in a country that is supposed to value freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, etc. Certainly has a different way to enshrine that in your legal code than the First Amendment to our United States Constitution. But allegedly, a country that supposedly values freedom is now prosecuting someone for their thoughts, for what's going on inside their head. Which feels all the more ironic to me that 1984 came out of Britain, because this is literally thought crime. This is literally the government becoming far too powerful to the point that people are afraid of breaking the law with the thoughts inside their own head. The problem with prosecution like this and creating criminal charges like this and establishing a pattern of thought crime trials is not that you are changing the law. That certainly is a problem, but it's not the problem. It's not that you're establishing bad precedent. That's a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem associated with this is that you've created a new cultural norm where people feel the need to self-censor before they ever get in trouble, before they ever cross the line. Creating a culture where people think it is illegal for me to pray, it is illegal for me to think thoughts to myself silently without bothering anyone, that is authoritarianism. That is a far too powerful government. That is essentially a totalitarian dictatorship. Whether we want to acknowledge that or not, we can pretend that we live in a free country all day long living in a culture like this. But if you live in a culture where the government presses criminal charges against you for closing your eyes, bowing your head, and silently praying to yourself, not bothering anyone, you don't live in a free country anymore. You don't. Whether you want to fight for that is up to you. But I don't think it's even remotely acceptable to pretend like you live in a free country when this is encouraged to be happening, where your government gets to act as judge, jury, and executioner, where your government gets to tell you whether or not it's acceptable for you to think certain thoughts to yourself in your head. You don't live in a free country anymore, if that is the case. When this happened, it was November of 2022, so it's been almost a year since this has happened, which is really crazy. The encounter with the officers that approached him was recorded on his phone. One of the officers, good for him, by the way, for recording that, and more people need to do that. "I'm so sorry for your loss," one officer replied, "but ultimately, I have to go along with the guidelines of the Public Space Protection Order to say that we are in the belief that therefore you are in breach of Clause 4A, which says about prayer and also acts of disapproval." So, according to the Public Space Protection Order from the BCP Council, You are not allowed to pray in a public space because it puts protection of public spaces at risk. And you're not allowed to disapprove of something in a public space because it puts the public space's protection at risk. I'm just standing praying, he said. I do understand that, but the protection order is in place for a reason, and we have to follow through on those regulations, the officer replied. A protection order is intended to stop antisocial behavior. The protection order for the abortion clinic has been in force since October of 2022 and will remain in place for 3 years. So interestingly, this went into effect like right before all of this happened. As part of the order, the BCP Council drew red lines around an abortion provider and designated the area a safe zone. We know that term here in the United States. We call it safe spaces, but same concept. Anyone caught blessing themselves with the sign of the cross, reciting scripture, or sprinkling holy water behind these red lines can be fined £100, about $113 or risk a court conviction. The order bars engaging in an act or an attempted act of approval or disapproval of abortion services. Because how dare you make the sign of the cross, recite scripture, just say scripture out loud to someone, or sprinkle holy water, because you are the real problem. You're the real evil in society if you are doing that. Unbelievable. He said that he stood outside of the clinic due to his personal experience with abortion. 22 years ago, I drove my ex-girlfriend to a facility and paid for her to have an abortion. It was a pivotal moment in my life. The consequences of my actions that day came back to grieve me years later when I realized I had lost my son Jacob to an abortion that I had paid for. He said that he prayed to God for my son Jacob, for other babies who have lost their lives to abortion, for their grieving families, and for abortion clinic staff. In the past, I assisted with abortions in the hospital as part of my Army medical training, but now I pray for those who perform abortions because I realize how harmful abortion is to women and families, and that every single human life is valuable no matter how small. Most of all, I'm moved to pray because of what happened to my son Jacob. Legislators in the UK Parliament have introduced a proposal to create similar zones near abortion clinics across England and Wales. So this is kind of the testing ground to see if this is going to fly, if this is going to be okay with UK citizenship, and make sure that everybody's going to be okay with it while they prosecute people for this, which is ridiculous. But assuming this becomes the norm, this is going to happen across England and Wales. This past February, 2 individuals were acquitted of all charges against them after they were accused of breaking the law for praying in front of a different abortion clinic in Birmingham. I will be fascinated to know what happens in this particular case, but make no mistake about it, this is a testing ground. This is an opportunity for the government to see just how far they can go in restricting anyone's civil liberties, starting with something that most people in today's day and age, sadly, would probably be okay with. I think most people today, sadly, would probably be okay with somebody who is Catholic or Christian reciting scripture outside of an abortion facility or praying outside of an abortion facility, even if they're not bothering anybody, being arrested for that and being charged with criminal prosecution for that, because that's becoming the norm. It is certainly becoming the norm in Western civilization, and our persecution as Christians looks a lot different than what's happening in the Middle East, for example, where people are losing their lives for their faith. Ours is mostly legal persecution at this point in time, but it certainly is ramping up and becoming the norm. And this type of behavior, not being protested, not being fought against, not being identified as wrong, as inherently antithetical to a free society, continues to give these unbelievably greedy, horrible legislators the green light to keep behaving like this and the green light to make these types of policies the norm. But don't think for a second this is going to stay isolated to a Catholic saying the rosary outside. Don't think for a second this is going to stay isolated to any denomination of Christianity, somebody who is Christian reciting scripture outside on the sidewalk. This type of extreme authoritarian government overhaul will impact every single human being. Period. End of story. Because if they can start prosecuting you for closing your eyes and thinking things to yourself, they will come for you next. What's that long litany of like a poem that was like, first they came for the communists and I didn't speak up because I'm not a communist. And then they came for these people and I didn't speak up because I'm not one of those people. Freedom of expression inherently requires that we fight for freedom of speech for everyone. Because if you don't, they will come for you next. And I always get this question when I speak on high school and college campuses. Well, if you really support free speech, why is it not something that you're worried about to censor don't you want to censor all of these evil people? Don't you want to censor racists? Don't you want to censor people who are lying? Don't you want to censor all of these horrible people that have really no place in modern society? No, I don't, actually. I would consider myself to be more of a free speech absolutist, which I know is a really scary term for me to say. So if I offended anybody in that process, I'm very sorry that I offended you by being a free speech absolutist, except I'm really not. But ultimately, I have just come to the belief over time that the only way to truly protect freedom of expression, the only way to protect good ideas, is to also protect bad ideas and bad speech and what modern society is calling hate speech. Because the only way to beat bad ideas is with good ideas. Silencing evil people, silencing racists, silencing socialism, silencing any of the things that you would personally disagree with, even if it is just nauseatingly horrifying to listen to, means you are creating a green light and a precedent legally to silence yourself, to silence good ideas. I'm a big believer that silencing or censoring or shutting down somebody who you disagree with is in no way, shape, or form the way to deal with bad ideas or the way to deal with dissent and disagreement. Rather, the only way to defeat bad ideas and to defeat evil is to drag that darkness into the light and defeat it with the truth. To fight lies with truth, to have an open dialogue, to have an open discussion. People are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, more often than not. And I think we assume people are so stupid that they'll never be able to decipher what is real or what isn't, which is why we have all of these fact checkers all over social media checking the misinformation that's rampant from creators like me who do our own research and don't rely on mainstream media to tell us what's really going on in the world. It certainly is why we have all of these wild terms and conditions and community guidelines on a lot of these platforms, which in some senses can be really good, right? If you do cross the line and you are no longer in free speech territory, but you are threatening someone or you are harassing them or you are leaking photos or private information of them on the internet, those things are never acceptable. And so at some point, community guidelines do need to exist. But in many ways, we're weaponizing those very guidelines and structures that we have built in social media to try to tell people we just don't like bad ideas. We just don't like evil people. We just don't like this really mean thing that someone said. But when we silence them and when we censor them and we let those ideas fester in the background and fester in the dark, we allow those ideas to become the norm. We allow those ideas to gain power. Because all of a sudden we've created a martyr of the person with the bad ideas, of the evil guy with the bad ideas, and it's bubbled to the surface and created a movement behind the scenes that all of a sudden has become the mainstream. And look at exactly what's happening in the world today as a result of that. That brings me to a crazy story that I saw about the United States this week. And more specifically, journalist Tucker Carlson. I don't care what you guys think about him. If you like him, if you hate him, it doesn't really matter, because this story is just outrageous to me that we are allowing something like this to happen and nobody's even blinking an eye about it. Tucker went on the Nelk Boys Full Send podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way. They put together some really awesome content over the years, but recently went on the Full Send podcast and was telling a story about an interview he was trying to set up, because theoretically Tucker Carlson really could just interview anyone at this point, and he should. Why not? It would be interesting. And the United States government stepping in to make sure that that interview could not happen at all, period, end of story. Take a listen to this.
I've been all over the world. I feel like I've been everywhere except Russia. And I was planning on it, and I got stopped by the U.S. government from doing it.
Oh, you were going to go?
So he was going to go to Russia, and he wanted to go and make content in Russia as an independent journalist now, and the U.S. government stepped in and said no.
Of course.
And what were you going to do?
Interview Putin. Why wouldn't
You
I?
had it set up?
I was working on it, and they broke into my text messages. The NSA broke into my Signal account.
If you don't know what Signal is, it's a lot like Telegram. It's like encrypted text messaging, supposedly, right? Supposedly, allegedly, these platforms like Telegram and Signal are so encrypted that nobody could hack into your messages. Obviously, that's not true. Now we know that the NSA is able to hack into Signal, so what's the point of encrypted text messages anyway? But they hacked into Tucker's encrypted private messages trying to set up an interview with Vladimir Putin, which, again, if you want to defeat bad ideas, bring them into the light. Expose them. Fight them with the truth. Don't just let them fester in the dark. Like, that would have been such an interesting conversation. It reminds me of that movie, The Interview, totally separate conversation, but unbelievable, right?
I didn't know they could do. I'm not hiding anything, but I was definitely hiding my plan to go interview Putin just because it's an interview. I got a call from somebody in Washington. This person said, meet me Sunday morning. So I go, and this person's like, are you planning a trip to go see Putin? This was the summer before the war started. And I was like, how would you know that? I haven't told anybody. I mean, anybody. Not my brother, not my wife, nobody. How would you know that? Because NSA pulled your text with this other person you were texting. And so I was intimidated. I'm embarrassed to admit, but I was.
I mean, who wouldn't be intimidated by that, though? If the NSA is hacking your private messages and you've told no one, not even your wife, that you've even remotely been thinking about this, and all of a sudden you get dragged in to have an immediate meeting with the United States government to intimidate you to back down, anybody would be intimidated by that.
Completely freaked out by it. I called a U.S. senator. Congress asked NSA, and NSA is like, yes, we did this, but for good reason.
Good reason. We did it. We're openly admitting to violating everything that this country stands for, but we did it for good reason, for public safety.
What would be a good reason to read my, what? But the head of NSA, it's fine. Because everyone's in on it. Republicans and Democrats are all in on it.
Not wrong. Not wrong at all.
And by it, I mean the assumption there's no privacy whatsoever, that they have a right to know everything you're saying and thinking.
That shit's scary.
And that's just not a right as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
By the way, if you have no privacy, you have no freedom. Freedom
True.
is predicated on privacy. It's like none of your business.
None of your freaking business, but insane, right? And obviously this extends beyond American freedom of speech when we're talking about getting other countries and the leaders of other countries involved. But if you have no freedom to think without any business of the government getting in the way, if you have no liberty to have private thoughts to yourself without the NSA hacking into basically your brain at this point and saying you're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to even have that idea, what kind of a society do we live in? I literally could not stand living in a dictatorship, authoritarian country like Russia, right? We all talk about how evil it is that Vladimir Putin has so much control over society in Russia. We talk about how that's such a horrible, backwards, dystopian society that we need to fight against, which is why our government has provided literally infinite blank checks to Ukraine. At this point, probably even going to fund Ukraine's next election, by the way, in case you didn't hear that in the news this week. But we do everything we can to save democracy, to fight for democracy. Well, why wouldn't you want to expose that? Why wouldn't you want to sit down with the leader of this horrible place and ask him why he does the things that he does? Why wouldn't you want to bring that darkness into the light to prove what you want to fight against? It just doesn't line up to me. While you're pouring every ounce of American taxpayer money, every ounce of our media attention, every ounce of our social media attention into fighting for democracy and destroying Russia, wouldn't an interview with Vladimir Putin help you in that cause? Expose that he's this maniac, horrible dictator? And the great irony of all of this in the process is that they're claiming, the people in power are claiming that we are fighting with everything that we have to keep freedom and democracy alive. But they won't even let you privately, encryptedly text message other people about what you want to say. They won't let you have an idea for an interview to share with other people. So I'm a little tired of pretending that we live on this high horse, morally speaking, that we are the moral guardians of the universe, that the way we do things is 100% perfect and needs to be imposed on everyone else, when we don't even let our own citizens freely text each other. We don't even let our own citizens have ideas for interviews without damaging public safety. Or for in the UK's case, we don't even let people close their eyes and think to themselves and pray silently. Silently. Without bothering anyone. Freedom of expression is not just something that's under attack abroad by evil authoritarian dictators. And they are. I'm not going to pretend like they have it all right either. They don't. Certainly not. And it could be a lot worse. A lot worse. But freedom of expression and freedom of thought are being absolutely eliminating eliminated right before our very eyes on our own soil, and we are saying nothing about it. And I'm not talking about, I said this mean thing on Twitter and I got censored. That sure is a problem. And it's happened to me many times. I'm talking about something far bigger than that. I'm talking about our government officials, not just in America, in the UK, in Europe, all over the world, establishing and normalizing a culture where you start to self-censor yourself because you are afraid of getting in trouble. Where you start to change your thoughts because you're afraid of getting in trouble. Where culture starts to change because your actions have changed as a result of your changing thoughts, because you're afraid of getting in trouble. The fear that is being implemented into people's lives right now might not even be something that you are consciously aware of as something changing your life. But it's there, and it's impacting every single person. It's impacting Tucker freaking Carlson, for the love of all that is good. He was afraid. He was intimidated. And who wouldn't be? With the full force and might of the United States government behind the people intimidating you. With no consequences for that. At what point are we going to stand up and say, enough? You do not have the right to tell me what I'm allowed to think. To think, let alone say or pray or protest or express disapproval of. My thoughts are my thoughts. I have complete 100% jurisdiction over them, not you. I'm telling you right now, as I'm about to go get on a plane. If we do not fight today for our freedom to think, let alone speak, we will lack the opportunity to do so in a matter of months, not even years. This is happening before our very eyes. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how long are we going to let it happen before we stand up and we say, enough? It's not okay. Enough for me. That's enough for me. All right, you guys, today was a little bit of a shorter stream because we are pre-recorded today since I am in Colorado. Please wish me luck as I say yes to the dress tomorrow, which I'm super excited about, and order my wedding dress and get some wedding planning stuff done while I am in Colorado. We will be live tomorrow from my parents' house. I'll keep you updated on timing and all of that, and pre-recorded again on Thursday. So I'll keep you updated along the way. We have a new episode tonight of our dating series, Outdated, breaking down culture's biggest lies on dating and relationship and replacing them with the truth, over in our locals community. So I will drop the link right now in the chat for you guys to go check out our locals community and join us over there. There's all kinds of really fun, exciting stuff that we do with extra content that doesn't exist anywhere else but on locals for you guys to check out very, very soon. And I want to remind you, please, please, please do me a huge favor and smash that follow or subscribe button on whatever platform you're watching on right now. It means the absolute world to me every time that you guys do that. And I'm so unbelievably grateful for you every time you continue to share the stream with other people in your lives. If you hadn't heard either of these two stories, please consider sharing this stream on your social media with a friend, with somebody that you think might be interested in it. Obviously, they are wildly underreported and will not ever be touched by the mainstream media with a 10-foot pole, which is very, very frustrating. But it's up to us to continue getting these important stories out there, and I love you guys for helping me with that all along the way. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your night, and we will see you back live tomorrow from Colorado on the road. Love you guys. Bye.